My name's Ryan Heath. I'm global tech correspondent here at Axios and the co-author of the AI Plus newsletter with Ina Fried. If it's your first time here this week at Axios House, welcome. How many first-timers have we got in the room? Excellent, welcome, welcome. And that means we've got a lot of happy returning customers. So welcome back to all of you who have joined us for one of our other events. We've got great programming throughout the week, so be sure to use the hashtag Axios events. Make sure you come back to one of our other great events. And we're absolutely jam-packed for Sam Altman tomorrow, but that is the sort of programming you can expect from us. So over the course of the next little while, we're going to be talking about cybersecurity for the other 90%. And to kick us off in that theme, we have the Chief Digital Officer of MasterCard, Jorn Lambert. Jorn, come and join us up on the stage. Yeah, round of applause for Jorn.
Thanks, Ryan.
Now, we're going to talk about payment cybersecurity, and there is a lot that goes into payments that I think people don't think about when they're swiping and tapping and shopping and just getting on with their really fabulous lives. So can you give us a sense of the scale of the payment system today, and then tell us what worries you most about how to keep that system secure?
Yeah, so obviously everybody knows MasterCard. We're a processing system. We process over 125 billion transactions per year in about 190 countries. We are a network, meaning we do not give cards to people. It's banks or fintechs that give cards to people. We do not directly onboard merchants. That is banks and their fintechs that do that. And so we have a network of about 23,000 banks that reach about 3 billion consumers, that reach about 110 million merchants through a whole ecosystem of intermediaries. And so the interesting piece in this cyber security debate is we can have the most robust firewalls against our shop, but that network needs to be protected too. And that is a very different angle, a very different lens to cybersecurity. And we spend, as you can imagine, a lot of time on that topic because every hacker that takes himself seriously is going to take a stab at it, right? And so we have a big focus on it. We are critical market infrastructure in a number of countries, meaning if we would go down, the economy of that country partially stops. So that just cannot happen, right? So the focus on that topic is really top of mind for us.
And so if we split it into sort of the MasterCard network, corporately MasterCard, what is it? Is it ransomware that you're most worried about? And then thinking about your customers, I'm imagining it's something like identity scams and other sort of minor forms of theft that don't feel minor to those customers. Is that the right way to think about it?
Yeah, so we look at it by, frankly, business case, meaning what is the biggest impact to the end users? And right now, the biggest impact is due to data breaches. So a hacker gets into, let's say, a hotel card database, or a movie streaming database, steals millions of credentials, and then starts to replay those and starts to transact on that. That huge business case, and actually, the cyber criminals are after the money, so they go where the biggest pot is. So that's the first category, and we have obviously solutions to protect there. And the second one, which is now really on the rise, thanks to or because of AI and generative AI, which is social engineering. Right? Your mother gets a phone call, somebody manages to emulate your voice and your way of talking and say, "Mom, can you send me some money?" Mom obviously would say, "Oh, of course," and they would send authenticated transactions. That is happening. I have actually seen a demo of somebody talking like me with my Flemish accent to my mother. Unbelievable. And well, she didn't. It was a demo. But what they can do now, is just incredible. And so that's number two. I would say DDoS attacks and ransomware is number three. That's actually of a different nature. It scales less. Yep. But obviously very scary and very scary to our partners.
So what can you as MasterCard do about that? Like there must be ways to make your transactions more secure, but is there any actual foolproof way to do it? Or do you have to actually go individually to your merchants, individually to card users, and get them to up their own personal hygiene when it comes to cybersecurity?
Good now. That would be quite a job. So I think the first one, the data breaches, there is a way to resolve that structurally, and that is not necessarily build more and more firewalls, because they will get broken. And so a couple of years ago, we went back to the basics and says, any firewall is going to get broken. And right now with digital payments, people have their credentials in card on file of merchants, on devices, in their car, everywhere. And so we said, well, we need to architect it in such a way that whatever that criminal breaches and steals, it becomes useless in the hands of that criminal. And what we call that tokenization. So what happens, many of you may use Apple Pay or Google Pay or Samsung Pay. What's in that phone, and that shows as a little card, what's in that phone is a token. It's not your real credential. It's a token with a very complicated cryptographic key that when you tap it, when you use it online, that token comes to us. We verify that it is a legitimate token with legitimate cryptogram from a legitimate device, then we translate it, we send it back to the bank. If it's not legit, if it may have been stolen, we stop it right there. And so we're now at about 25% of all e-commerce is now tokenized. We're very fast scaling this. In a couple of years, that will be close to 100%. And then at that moment, the data breach issue, as far as payment is concerned, is a lot less of a worry.
And to the extent that there's any hold up in that process, what is it? You know, like I was shocked when I moved to the US how long it took American sort of banks to have PIN attached to their cards. Like it was mind-boggling.
I was too. Yeah.
Is there anything ridiculous like that that is holding up the spread of tokenization?
It's just work. Honestly, we're now scaling at over 80% per year in terms of growth. Mm-hmm. We've done the big players. Now we move to the long tail. It's a very fast ecosystem with many intermediaries that all need to get on the same page. All the tide needs to lift. It takes a little while, but it's accelerating. Because what happens is, if you close the doors, the hackers are moving to the most vulnerable places. That gets hit harder, and therefore their business case to move faster is much better. Right? So we'll see that accelerating over the years. Yep. That doesn't solve the scams, though. That doesn't solve my mother's thinking that she sends me money. And that's where we are applying AI. That's where we have systems that constantly monitor. If, for example, we're seeing a spike of transactions of a credential of a destination that has been opened 2 minutes ago, and we suddenly see 5 transactions, right? That's phishing, right? Yep. And we'll shut that down within seconds, frankly, when we've seen something like that. Yep.
Now, in theory, AI as well, if we think of AI as compounding and the machine as learning as it sucks in more data, are you finding that theory applicable to your world, where you are getting quicker at spotting the patterns, or maybe even anticipating where a theft or some other sort of fraud is going to occur?
Yeah, absolutely. And we have the benefit of seeing across banks, across merchants, across countries, whereby a bank or a merchant may have a very narrow lens and therefore miss it. We see all these patterns faster than anybody because we're not domain restricted. And so AI has been enormously helping. Now, the bad guys have access to some of the same tools. Yeah. And so it's a real cat and mouse constantly, and having the right prompt engineering there to make sure that we stay ahead is crucial.
And these days, cybercriminal networks, the biggest ones, are responsible for so many attacks. It just seems like it's like the mafia on steroids. What do you know about those biggest players? And is there an intersection sort of with different adversarial, not very democratic governments that require you to then work with governments against them?
Well, so we work with governments a lot, both in informing, in educating. We are working with law enforcement all the time, right? Yeah. Because, very often we can identify the fraudster. because they have to have a credential on which to land the funds. So that's a very routine place. At times that crosses borders, at times that crosses difficult borders. But yes, we work with all governments where we're present. We have an obligation to do that, to make sure that we help law enforcement. I think that's a huge topic. And that cuts across, right? Across data breaches, across the scams, across DDoS attacks. Lots of forensics happening there to help law enforcement to get to the bad guys.
And so that's at the macro level with the biggest gangs, basically. Is there anything that, if you're a small business, so we're talking about the other 90% here, where you have advice for them on how they can work with the police or with you or with any other sort of official entity to deal with the fallout when there is some kind of breach of the payment system?
Well, so firstly, we have briefings towards the SME community on a regular basis, whereby we provide them with best practices on how to limit vulnerabilities. Yep. We have tools that allow them to scan like an X-ray of their businesses to see, well, where are the vulnerabilities and how can they remedy. And so that's preventive. That's getting ahead of the facts. And that's really important because education goes a long way, right? Most of the breaches, most of the problems are frankly should be avoidable because they're not very clever ones, right? So that's the first line of defense. After that, indeed, with the banks that reach those merchants, we are making sure that they have then the ways to unwind the problems that they have. We are protecting consumers. Consumers have what we call a zero liability. So if they are a victim of something that happens due to cyber, yep, they will not carry any liability. It's a very important principle because there's enough stress there already. Yep. And so again, we help unwinding some of that and making sure that those who carry the liability in the system are protected and can continue their business.
Yeah. And that is a tricky balance in some respects because, like, as a consumer, I want the zero liability too, but then it doesn't give me much of an incentive to behave in a safe way if I think MasterCard or competitors are just going to rescue me.
I disagree. The trouble of having to chase that, the trouble of having to change your credentials, to reload it, whatever you have, people do not want to be compromised. And I don't think. I think the zero liability and the peace of mind on the financial side is great. It's still a lot of trouble and hassle that people want to avoid. So I think people are very are with us on that journey for sure.
And let's finish on one fun thing, Jorn. What has been elevating your mood this week in Davos?
Well,
there's no wrong answers. You can tell us the truth.
What's elevated my mood is that we moved on from breathless metaverse to perhaps real problems for real people, and to me, I'm pleased because last year, 2 years ago, I find myself talking about things that I'm not entirely sure or as real as what we talked about just now. And now my comms person will be mortified that I said this.
That's a strong recommendation to check out the forum's brand new Metaverse Pavilion down near the Ice Village. You heard it here first at Axios House. Jorn, thank you very much for that conversation. A round of applause for Jorn. And next up, we have Axios publisher Nicholas Johnson with another great conversation. There you go, Nick.
Thank you, Ryan, and thank all of you for being here. It's hard to believe we're at the halfway point of Axios House this week in Davos. We couldn't do it all without any of you being here, so that's great. We've got a lot of awesome programming still to come. Grab me after this when I'm off stage. I'll tell you about all the exciting stuff. Check it out online. And of course, it goes without saying that none of this that we do here would be possible without the support of our partners. So we're hugely grateful for At Bay for making this conversation possible. So I'm very excited to welcome for a view from the top conversation up here, someone our conversations have now spanned 9 time zones. I think, which makes me exhausted just thinking about. Rotem Miram, CEO of At Bay, welcome up back to the Axios stage. How are you? Good. We've now been halfway around the world. Let's start big picture about what we're talking here. We've been sharing the WEF data about who's behind a lot of GDP. And like we talk a lot about like major corporations, but like small businesses still play a huge role. And as we just heard, like there are incredible risks that they face. So for their security, for their cybersecurity needs, who's responsible for closing that gap?
Yeah, so thank you for having us. And maybe for those who aren't familiar with AdBay, we are a cyber insurance and security company based in the US. So we have 35,000 businesses in the US that we protect. We provide them both with the insurance and security. And so it's our money at stake. And so we make it a priority to figure out what actually matters. And when you think about an SMB, they lack resources. So they lack expertise and they lack, money to spend on security.
I mean, that's a lot. They lack it all.
Yeah, I mean, what they need is for security to be simple and cheap. And security is anything but those two things. We have really pervasive issues in security, starting with the fact that the internet is a very bad neighborhood. When you're in the internet, you are next door neighbor to every criminal on the planet, and you are up against organized criminal groups that are sponsored by nation states. This is not a use case that SMBs were supposed to ever deal with, and they're getting very little help from the government. One of the major jobs of government is to provide law and order, but the government has been very selective in the way that it intervenes with cybercrime, oftentimes neglecting the small business. So they're on their own. And then they have, even the smallest business has dozens of software products in their stack, and each one breaks and has an issue multiple times a year. And so they find themselves with a very fragile stack that is very difficult to maintain. Imagine all you wanted was just to run your software. Now you need to constantly be reading blogs and updating features. And last but not least, I think because SMBs don't have a lot of money, security companies focus on the enterprise. And security has become more sophisticated, more expensive, and more difficult to manage. And SMBs are just simply left behind. They just can't.
This is a really grim picture. I hope this conversation is going to turn.
It will. It will.
Well, so let's talk about where that responsibility lies. Like, who needs to step into that breach?
Yeah. So I think I think there's a role for both government and for software vendors where I feel that there's nobody designed the internet on purpose to be very risky. We were a little bit naive. We thought that with technology will solve it, and if not technology, then the market will solve it. But it isn't. It isn't being solved. There is a market failure, I would say, for the small business. Today, software, I think we have normalized that software breaks all the time. And we've created a system that does not really incentivize the software vendors to make their software less fragile. And I think that is a major issue. Basically, today, software is use at your own risk. The terms and conditions say that if it breaks, it's your problem. I don't even need to notify about you that I do it, or maybe I just notify you, but it's on you to find out my notice and to manage the hack itself. But it goes even deeper than just vulnerabilities. Vulnerabilities are a big issue, but what I find more challenging is that software is designed many times explicitly to be not secure. And so, because here's one thing that nobody likes about security is that you can't get security without giving something back, right? Even think about trying to log in. Once you need to multi-factor authentication, that means I need to pull up my phone, I need to find the app with the authenticator, I got to pull in the code. That adds friction. Nobody likes that. Oftentimes, to enable security, we need to take away functionality. We need to make software more expensive. We need to make the innovation cycle longer. This maybe wasn't a good idea 20 years ago, but I would argue that today, with cyber attacks where they are, and with software being very mature, I don't think we're in the right place.
How can you emphasize this? So like what I love about hosting these conversations in Davos is that when we pick a topic, like we get a crowd that really cares, that are really experts in it. And because it's Davos, they're either really important on these topics or think they're very important. So we'll take both. What is your call to action? Like you're going down the street tomorrow to speak, in the World Congress Pavilion. What should the takeaway be for folks here about how to solve this problem?
Yeah, so what I would say is I think that software vendors, a lot of them are also in a position where they enjoy, let's call it an oligopoly, if not a monopoly, position in their space. We need to create the right incentive structures. So it's about, government has a role to play, the media has a role to play, consumers have a role to play. And from our perspective as an insurance company, what we find is that we have a role to play because, again, it's our money at risk. And when we see that certain software products contribute to an organization being riskier, we reflect that risk back to the customer. We basically say, hey, if you want to choose technology A over B, you'll need to pay me more in insurance. And not only do you not like to pay more on your insurance, also this is a signal that this is a worse solution. So make sure you're getting something back for that additional insurance cost.
But if you talk about vendors needing to do that, like you say, they have to introduce friction to it, and they don't want to do that because that won't make the product as efficient. And so is a stopgap here government intervention? Is that a message you'll be delivering like up and down the promenade as far as like where government organizations have to step in and act?
I think government can and should help in two places. I mentioned earlier, one, we need to make it a little bit more hard to attack, or at least we need to increase the stakes for choosing to become an attacker, even if you are attacking small businesses. So I think the government's very good at going after folks who attack our critical infrastructure. We're not that good when they attack a mom and pop shop, in Florida. Like we just don't care enough. And I think that we need to ask more from our government. That's kind of number one. Number two is that government does need to come in and provide the right incentive structure, both by creating incentives, but also by creating compliance and regulation in some cases. The trick and the challenge with government is that we can't ask them to figure out the blueprint for how to do this right. Government has not historically been really good at understanding the nuance of technology and affecting a very detailed response. Where I see a really big opportunity is actually the insurance industry that looks at the risk. We are the ones who pay again and again. AdBay today pays. We have 150 to 200 claims every month where we have to pay for issues. We collect the data. We see what matters, and when we sell policies, we communicate through our underwriting guidelines and through our prices. We communicate what we think is a good security stack, what we think is a bad security stack, and so we are starting to create the standard for security. And where government can come in is to come in and reinforce those standards, and in some cases turn them into compliance.
So speaking of government, I think it would be against the law to have a panel at Davos and not talk about AI. So give us a sense of like where that fits into approaching cybersecurity, making it more challenging. Is it it's a threat? It's also perhaps a possible tool to use against bad actors?
Yeah, so every technology can be used for good, can be used for evil. The unfortunate reality is that new technologies are typically, or let's say differently, attackers are overrepresented in the early adopter community. And so in the early days of every technology, it's the attackers who take advantage first. And so I think things are going to be worse before they get better.
Before it gets catch up on with the good guys.
Before they get better. And I think we're already seeing immediately, and the previous kind of panel mentioned this, phishing and scamming has become a lot easier. But long term, we're deeply worried. This democratization of capabilities, the fact that even the smallest and unsophisticated attacker can now have very sophisticated capabilities will just mean there will be more attackers, they will be more powerful. And when we have machine writing code for us, and a lot of open source technology out there, we don't really know who's putting what into the code that the machine's writing, and that just kind of has a potential to be very, very bad news.
Okay, let's spin this forward. Before we get the hook here, let's end on one fun thing, one future thing. I'm going to regret asking this question, but tell me the scariest thing that's coming now that you see in the cybersecurity line.
The scariest thing for me is actually not AI. I think it's going to take a while for AI to emerge. What we have seen in the past, I would say, decade, is that cyber has emerged as the first theater of war. So when nation states start to have friction, cyber is typically the first arena, and sometimes maybe the only arena in which they communicate signals to each other. And we have right now 3 potential global points of frictions between superpowers, whether it's in Ukraine with Russia, Israel, and Iran, or in China over Taiwan. And those 3 can create there's a chance that we're going to see a lot of those kind of friction mount into real cybersecurity, real attacks at a scale that we have not seen since the 2017, NotPetya.
Well, on that note, there's a bar in the back. But don't rush there yet. We'll have one more closing conversation. We'll bring Ryan back to the stage. Rotem, great to see you again. Thanks for being here.
Likewise. Thank you.
Hello again, everyone. For those of you who just walked in, I'm Ryan Heath, Axios Global Tech Correspondent, and welcome to Axios House, where we have the coolest conversations on the promenade. We're going to get you back to your drinks very shortly, and before that, I'm going to welcome to the stage Jitu Patel, who is Executive Vice President and General Manager for Security and Collaboration at Cisco. So it's all rainbows in these cybersecurity conversations.
All rainbows
isn't it?
and wonderful stuff.
So I've been writing and speaking around cybersecurity
That's
stuff
a great
for 20
jacket,
years.
by the way.
Thank you. Thank you.
Very trendy.
You've been doing it for even longer than 20 years, sir.
30, but who's counting?
There we go. And it always feels like the adversaries are on the front foot. But today, now, we've got floods of data, so just massively more surface area. You've got people working at home, at the office, on unsecure public Wi-Fi networks, on their mobiles, on their laptops. It's just attack area everywhere. What can we do to flip that dynamic so that it's not always the good guys on the defensive?
Yeah, I mean, the way that the industry has always thought about this is the adversary has the inherent advantage because they have to be right once. You have to be right every single time as a defender. I think this is the first time that at least I see possibility where the defender might actually have an advantage tipped to on their side because they'll have a data advantage.
Yep.
We're not quite there yet, but there's a possibility that that could happen. And I think if you, with the data and AI and reducing complexity, I think you could actually have that be the case. Right now, what ends up happening is it's really hard for the defender to defend themselves, and it's really easy for the attacker to penetrate. And that has to get flipped, and I think we might be able to do that. I'm optimistic because of some of the innovations that are starting to occur.
Yep. We've spoken a bit about phishing attacks. That's some of the most basic stuff.
Yep.
And if we've worked for a smart employer, I know I do, we've all been subjected to those videos about how to avoid phishing attacks that get sent to us. What can we actually do to reduce that? Like, are there technical measures that we can take, or is it all down to individual action and people being responsible?
Firstly, I think there's good news and bad news. In my mind, I think the bad news is that it's going to get harder and harder over time to distinguish between legitimate activity and malicious attacks. And so, the prince from an exotic country who sent you an email that says, click over here and download your $10 million with a bunch of typos in them, I think those attacks are going to get far more bespoke and personalized, where it says, it was good to see you last week at the football game, here are some pictures, download them. And so I think it'll get harder and harder for normal people to distinguish between them. So that's on the downside. The upside is I do think there's an opportunity we have, and I think the security industry has done a pretty poor job of making security simple to understand for the masses. Yep. Like, if you think about security, so one of the few areas where the addressable population that you're looking at is about 8 billion people, right? And if you then look at the people that are building security, platforms and tools, they're all power users in a very homogeneous crowd. And I think we need more women in security. I think we need more people from liberal arts backgrounds. I think you need more people that represent the kind of people for whom we're building security solutions. And I don't think that's the case today. I think it's a very, very kind of jargon-rich environment where unless you're a power user, you can't really talk to anyone. And I think it's super damaging, and it's something that we have to actually...
There's kind of a think different meta theme.
It has to be, yeah.
So I was doing another panel today with the Office for National Cyber Director from the White House. And one of the things they raised that they said would be a priority throughout 2024 is something called memory safety. And so in line with the idea of thinking differently, do we have to go upstream here? So instead of just making better messages that individuals learn about and respond to, do we have to do things like change the programming language of some of our most popular pieces of software so that they're just harder to attack?
I think at least what I think is going to be the unlock, and this is where we're starting to see some really good results, is the way that the cyber industry has evolved is every single threat that emerges has a response by another company that gets founded to go out and address that threat. And so innovation has largely been through patchwork. Right? You've got about 3,500 vendors in the market right now. No one owns any substantial share of the market. And it gets highly complex because on average, people have 50 to 70 different providers in the cybersecurity stack. The beauty about actually getting to a fewer level of consolidated platforms is the telemetry can be correlated across control points. So if I have an email,
Like you can actually keep track of what is going on.
I can keep
Is that
track
the
and I
point of
can
this
actually
version?
make sure that a low-level alert in 3 areas could actually amount to a high-level alert when you put the 3 together, rather than being ignored. And I think that's the area where there's going to be a fair amount of possibility for unlocks that can happen.
Yep.
You know.
Now, the theme of this session is about cybersecurity for the other 90%. So
Yeah.
it sounds like nobody
That's actually
except
the only one
biggest-
that matters because like if the weakest link actually dictates the entirety of the value
Yeah.
chain.
So tell us about your security operations center assistant, because that strikes me as a use of AI that can expand proper top-level protections to smaller organizations. Because I don't think any small organization can cope with 50 to 70 anythings.
Yeah. So I think we have this concept that we talk about internally, and there was I think REF came out with a report, or Accenture came out with a report recently that talked about it as well, this notion of cyber inequity. We talk about it as a security poverty line, where there's a substantial number of companies and organizations that aren't able to do the basics to keep themselves protected. And they fall below the security poverty line. And what do you do to go out and help with that? The first thing you have to do, if you think about what are the reasons for people falling below the security poverty line, the first one is complexity. The second one is cost. Third one is pure education and communication, where people don't know a lot about what to do to keep themselves safe. But complexity, and then the fourth one is talent shortage, huge talent shortage. There's about 4 million jobs that go unfilled in the US alone in cybersecurity per year. And so what do we do? And I think this is where AI can actually create some huge opportunities for us.
You have to think differently. Like, we're never going to find 4 million extra cybersecurity.
No, you have to
professionals in the
think
US.
discontinuously, and it has to be leapfrog, right? There's no way. There has to be a level of asymmetry, otherwise you're not going to be able to go out and get to what needs to happen. So on the simplicity side, on the complexity side, how do you inject simplicity so that you can drive safety? I think there's going to be more and more experiences that'll get to be natural language instructed. Think about going out and setting a rule for a firewall right now. You need a PhD to do that. It's ridiculous. And the reason that people need 15, 20 years of experience and dexterity is because the industry has made that super complicated. If we can actually make that instructed with natural language, you can have someone who's an intern out of college start to go out and do that. And that's where your talent shortage goes down precipitously. So I do think that there's going to be an opportunity. And we should drive for that. The problem is we keep hiring power users in security. It would be great for us to hire people from Spotify to build security systems, because you would actually have great user experiences and people would know what to do to protect themselves. Whereas right now, it's very intimidating for an average citizen to say, what do I need to do to protect myself? Most people don't even have 2FA turned on for their financial services systems. And why is that? It's because it's too hard. And that doesn't make them stupid. That makes the industry inept. And we should take responsibility and make sure that we can do something different about that.
That's actually a really good segue to my next question, which was about where the boundaries lie now for these technical roles. So if you're a big organization, you've got a chief information security officer, you might have a chief technical officer, you might have a chief information officer, but it strikes me that this sort of change will have to be driven by CEOs, probably. If it's left as a technical specialism, there'll be versions of repeating the problems you've just described?
It has to be driven by the CEO and it has to be operating at machine scale. It can't operate at human scale anymore. And one of the most important aspects is going to be data and telemetry that can be correlated. And the companies that will do better in catching the bad folks are the ones that actually have the most amount of data. This is a data game, you know, and the more data you have and the more you can predict and prevent rather than detect and respond, you know, the better off you're going to be. And I feel like this is an exciting time in cyber, and it's also a very crucial time because I think you were mentioning this earlier that, you know, it is you had a really eloquent choice of words that you were using on, it's a first class, you know, kind of attack vector for warfare. And you phrased it far more eloquently than I did. But that actually is a really important point, which is it's critical infrastructure that goes out and can completely disrupt other critical infrastructure, which can stall society completely. And the only way that you can stop that is you have to make sure that you have responses that are fully, you know, at machine scale and automated. I don't think you can do this at human scale. And that requires that you actually have thought through the data side, you know, with a level of kind of detail, and it's not just haphazardly put together.
There we go. Sounds like a good use of AI. Let's end on one fun thing.
Yeah.
What has been fun for you this week in Davos?
This week, well, I did like 15 minutes of shopping. That was fun. But no, I think the nice part about Davos is the concentration of you know, the right people that you want to meet all within a 1 mile radius, and you can just meet all of them very, very quickly, which actually makes me sad because I wish there were not as much of a dependency on geography for people being able to create connection. In fact, one of the other businesses I run is WebEx, and I don't like the fact that serendipity is so important, but it is the reality, you know. And there's times that these events are really important, but we got to figure out and crack the code on how we can create the same level of happenstance and serendipity without actually having to all fly into a city which is fully snowed in and. You know, like it just doesn't make any logical sense. There's no scale in the city right now. Like, why are we doing this? But it's a great city.
I hope we don't have to have every possible app open at all times to create that serendipity.
Exactly.
But I'm glad that there is something that we can still do at human scale, and I'm glad that you joined us, Jitu Patel.
It's a pleasure.
Up on stage. We've got lots more programming throughout the rest of the week here at Axios House. I am going to put it out there that there probably aren't any spots left for Sam Altman and Alex Karp tomorrow. But we
You had me over Sam Altman? What's the matter with you? It's like...
We're very inclusive. And we've got plenty of other events running through Thursday. So now enjoy another drink and some great food on us. And that's all for tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks so much.